All right, our next speaker is Christopher Horner. He's a senior fellow at the Competitive Enterprise Institute, where he oversees petitions and litigations on topics including data access and quality laws, the Freedom of Information Act, government, science and agency statutory compliance, and other legal matters involving environment and energy issues, international environmental treaties, and climate policy. Help me welcome Christopher.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here, and for you listening to me. It's a privilege and honor to be around so many distinguished guests and even refugees from various European outposts. I see my friend Roger from the UK, Garrett from Germany, Denmark, and of course, the Environmental Protection Agency. I want to try to tie together the reason you've heard all these things. Why are they doing these things? What is it all about? Well, it's not about the climate. And I think that's inescapable. In fact, in my new book, Power Grab, I began at a position where there really is no disagreement. The temperature after cap and trade will be whatever it was going to be. It's not about the climate. It's unreasonable to conclude it's about the climate. So I drill down, so to speak, and figure out what is it really about? And the answer isn't encouraging, but again, when it comes to our friends who don't think you can be trusted with so many, many freedoms, the issue isn't the issue. The issue is, well, you recall a speech our president gave in which he said you can't eat what you want, drive what you want, or put your thermostat where you want. Other than that, he assures you of purely a free existence. If you're willing to accept them at their word, which is what I do in this book, or come up with a very good reason to believe that in all of these statements like that talk, that in isolation just appear very strange, they're lying. They were misstatements. They actually mean something completely different at all levels of government and with the groups they work with. They're now even admitting that this is about whatever works, as you'll see in a moment. Now, cap and trade, it's a VAT. Now, the conventional wisdom in Washington is, well, if you're going to have a European-style social democracy, you're going to have European-style taxation, and the VAT is the only thing that can provide, as the phrase goes, the gusher of revenue that you will need. That is not true. A cap and trade is like a VAT in that it's assessed at every step throughout commerce of something, but unlike a VAT, it appears on no receipts, but it does provide a gusher of revenue, as you'll see, or it's expected to, if you listen to our friends in the administration. It is expected to raise billions, but not from big business, from voters. Businesses pass on taxes and other costs until they can't, and then they leave. And they've got a lot of places to go once we do this to ourselves. Green jobs, it's an ideological push, and it will bring a European-style disaster. I hope I have time to address that at the end. But notice the irony here. President Obama, on 8 occasions, said, think about what's happening in countries like Spain. If we wanted to see the model for his green economy. Okay, let's think about what's happening in countries like Spain. The president is lecturing Mr. Zapatero to stop the gusher of public expenditure, public debt. Debt means taxes or insolvency, or they're the next Greece. Meanwhile, the Spanish government, as you'll read on Pajamas later today, and if you were in the session with Dr. Gabriel Calzada right now, you'd be learning about the Spanish government has admitted what Dr. Calzada and others found, that the green jobs economy is bankrupting the state, and they need to stop the hemorrhaging, or they will become the next Greece. Meanwhile, the president is stepping on the gas here much harder to make that happen. It's all about, as you'll see, this fundamental transformation thing. But we don't want Spain to bring us down before we affect it. Now, the agenda. The horrors of affordable, abundant energy. You've heard about them for years. There's just enough of them, way too many of you and me, and if we get rich, why, we'll want houses that are bigger and like a big pair of pants. Pretty soon you'll fill them out, and you'll want babies, and then you'll want automobiles for your suburban living, and then roads on which to drive, and all of those things that wealth bring. But they ignore that wealthier is healthier and wealthier is cleaner. It's not about the environment to them. So George Will wrote a column in October that I thought nailed it. He said the concept of abundant energy, quote, horrifies people who relish scarcity because scarcity requires, or so they say, government to ration what is scarce and to generally boss people to mend their behavior. Today there's a name for the political doctrine that rejoices in scarcity of everything except government. Very well put. The name is environmentalism, and the asterisk is it's also the Obama administration's agenda and the Pelosi-Reid effort to impose cap and trade and so on. Green jobs. There has been a consistent excuse for this agenda. Now, in 1988, there was a hearing held on, if you watch PBS, you've seen the show Frontline, in which Senator Tim Wirth, who now heads the UN Foundation for Ted Turner, at the time was a senator chairing a hearing with Mr. Gore, and Senator Kerry says with him, in his recent push for his bill, in which Senator Wirth told PBS, that they engaged in stagecraft. That is, they called the Weather Bureau and they said, what's likely to be the hottest day? And then they opened the windows the night before the hearing to defeat the air conditioning, because in the old Senate building, man can't control the climate any more than he can outside. So they left the windows open during this, what turned out to be the hottest day of the year. And he said, so we got these shots of that wonderful James Hansen mopping his sweaty brow before all the cameras. That's the very famous hearing that kicked off the political issue that is global warming in America. And at the time, Tim Wirth said, we need to try to ride the global warming issue, even if the theory of global warming is wrong. To have approached it as if it's real means energy conservation, we'll be doing the right thing anyway. He's talking about coerced energy conservation, of course. He's a lawmaker. He's seeking to ride the issue to adopt a policy agenda. We'll be doing the right thing in terms of our policy. And if you saw the President's State of the Union speech in late January, he said, even if you doubt the evidence, nodding to its underwhelming nature, providing incentives for energy efficiency and clean energy are the right thing to do for our future. 22 years later, they still can't make their case, so they come down to ultimately it's the right thing to do every single time. They can't make their case. We've proven that, though the burden of proof is not on us, and that's something you need never let go of. But they can't make their case, so it always comes down to it's the right thing to do. But what is it? Environmentalism, as it's now constituted, seeks to use the state to create scarcity to impose their will over you, using the state's authority. Don't believe me? Listen to them. The crowd's objective in this creepy Orwellian rhetoric they've mastered of organizing society has never changed. The vehicle changes. What's fashionable changes. The latest victim to be saved from the horrors of individual liberty changes. Now it's the environment. It was the worker before, but he could fight back and throw the shackles off. Now it's the environment. We must save the environment from capitalism. But the agenda never changes. Presently, it's climate and clean energy, which actually is a coincidence, because there's a pollster for former President Bill Clinton who now works for other members of that team who conducted some polls and found out, came back with a memo saying they're not buying it. You've got to stop saying cap and trade. You've got to stop saying global warming. Pull it back, re-unveil it as green jobs and clean energy. And lo and behold, that happened. But if you notice, it's still cap and trade. It's still the same agenda. They're changing the excuse, as you'll see. But this is how bad they want it to get. We have an energy and climate czar, someone who's put in a position that didn't exist, clearly for the reason that she would never survive political scrutiny that comes with Senate confirmation, and she is actually lording over to cabinet officers or cabinet level, EPA and energy. Carol Browner, I call her Hal, which you'll know if you've seen the movie 2001, fits very well. She gave an interview to U.S. News saying, we need to make sure that eventually we can get to a system where an electric company will be able to hold back some of the power so that maybe your air conditioner won't operate at its peak. You'll still be able to cool your house, not as much as you would like, implying as much as Hal would like. She's afraid she can't open those vents for you. This mission is too important to allow you to jeopardize it. She said, but that'll be a savings to the consumer. You see, imagine all the money they're saving in India and Haiti right now. Everything's sold as it's being a savings to you, but the poor dears can't navigate that thermostat, what with two, an up and a down arrow, so we'll step in. Do you realize this is out of Washington? They're actually saying, this puts meat on the bones of the president's speech when he said, we can't eat as much as we want, drive our SUVs, and keep our thermostat at 72 degrees at all times, and expect other countries are going to say, okay, to which we said, I didn't ask. All right? Now, an environmentalist, particularly a global warming alarmist, sees a chart, any chart, particularly where the zero is suppressed or they've cleverly chosen their baseline, and they say three words. What are they? At this rate? Well, at this rate, their industry's doomed. You'll see the public is not buying it. It's a long-term polling problem, and it's getting worse. We've come a long way. The post-ClimateGate admissions regarding the science, which I'll address, the Green Group admissions about cap and trade, the activist admissions have been clear, but recently politicians had made admissions that I will address that show their desperation. Now, about the Green Group admissions about cap and trade, what I mean is Greenpeace said it won't do anything, and they're right. I'll use a chart of Chip Knappenberger's here in a moment where Greenpeace acknowledges something. The temperature after cap and trade will be whatever it would have been. Friends of the Earth have been writing papers since April called Subprime Carbon. And they're screaming, don't let those fellows from Wall Street who have come over calling it our new playground, nirvana, I smell bucks to be made, I've got it all in the book. Don't let them crawl out from the rubble they have created with the assistance of the state to, again, join with the state to create a similar certainty of wreckage. And you ought to listen to Friends of the Earth on this one. Busted clock and all that. So whatever will work is the story. John Kerry said 2 weeks ago about cap and trade, the global warming bill, this is not an environment bill. He said that because he pulled it away from Earth Day release, which was the original plan, because they wanted to be associated with Earth Day Moon Battery, and then they decided maybe they shouldn't be associated with Earth Day Moon Battery. So he came back and said it's not a climate bill. It's not an environment bill. The global warming bill is not an environment bill. He's right. The temperature after cap and trade would be whatever it would have been. This is the same guy who said, well, I don't know what cap and trade means, by way of explaining why his bill isn't a cap and trade bill, though it still had cap and trade in it. What he was saying was, you understand what cap and trade means. Even if you can't describe it any better than Senator Kerry, though our president knows what it means, as you'll see, you know it's a tax, and it's probably less efficient than actually taxing you directly, and therefore meaner to seniors and the poor, economically harmful, very beneficial to India, China, Mexico, and so on. Nothing they would do through the front door. And Lindsey Graham said a week ago, it's not a global warming bill to me because global warming as a reason to pass legislation doesn't exist anymore. Can you imagine a more wretched admission from a lawmaker? Well, the reason we were pushing it before doesn't exist anymore, so it's about something else. I don't know, what appeals to you? They don't think very much of us, do they? Possibly as little as we think of some of them. Now, what he's talking about is, you recall this probably most disturbing magazine cover in recent memory. The reason Lindsey Graham and John Kerry are running away from the issue is because of ClimateGate, as we heard. Even from people who want it to go away, as we've heard in the last 20 hours, they still acknowledge it's a very big deal, and it is. We're told it's nothing but a flesh wound, come back and fight, you cowards. But it's only the latest in a series of what would be mortal wounds if they didn't have the media and the political class carrying them. But we've settled that science is settled thing now, haven't we? Judith Curry, in an open letter via Anthony Watts' great website, who said in quite a U-turn here, no one really believes that the science is settled or that the debate is over. Now, of course, they've been dining out on this for years, and everybody said that, and only you flat earthers would deny it. Now she says nobody actually believes it. Scientists and others that say this seem to want to advance a particular agenda. There is nothing more detrimental to public trust than such statements. Interesting. This is what the EPA testified about a week later. The science behind climate change is settled, Jackson said during testimony Wednesday. That's what you call climate change denial. The administration is saying, well, the science is too settled because it doesn't withstand scrutiny. You remember this one, Mr. Jones at the head of ClimateGate. All of these things they could not let go of, they've had to let go of as they attempt to salvage their franchise. The medieval warm period, okay, possibly is warmer, and global. Temperatures not unusual. Read the EPA endangerment finding. Temperatures have to be unusual or they don't have a leg to stand on. They really don't anyway. The science is not settled. So the BBC asked Mr. Jones, when the scientists say the debate on climate change is over, what exactly do they mean and what don't they mean? And Jones said, I don't know why people say that, but I don't believe the vast majority of climate scientists think this. This is not my view. This is a neck-jerking U-turn. Remember, they have dined out and sought to avoid exposure and scrutiny for years by screaming it's over. Must act now. Sign here. Details to follow. Cap and trade, all climate policies have the same ultimate objectives. Then candidate Barack Obama, trying to wow the San Francisco Chronicle editorial board, said on January 8th, 2008, under my plan of a cap and trade system, electricity prices would necessarily skyrocket. He is not an economic illiterate. That is the point. It is axiomatic. He admitted it. We heard a lot of backfilling later, said, don't worry, I've got a scheme to make sure it doesn't cost anything. Then it won't do anything. And why would you bother? Well, he admitted the truth here, and necessary was, according to his Treasury Secretary, it's necessary if you're going to change how people use energy. Price it out of their reach. You're greedy, you'll invent pixie dust. This would also raise billions of dollars, the president said. So using the Freedom of Information Act, I asked Treasury how many billions of dollars. And in a memo written 6 days after his election, they said, okay, he wants to do it. Here's how and here's why. Under the justification paragraph, they said revenues. This will raise, quote, possibly several percentage points of GDP, parentheses, i.e. the equivalent of the corporate income tax. Our rather high corporate income tax raises $400 billion per year. Our biggest tax in history in constant dollars was $107 billion per year. That was the tax to pay off World War II, a real threat that was an expiring tax. This is not. This is a very big tax. In fact, it is the most significant revenue-generating proposal of our time. We don't, Roger and Gert, we don't have tax increases in Washington anymore. We have revenue-generating opportunities, and this is the most significant one of our time. Democrat Senator Benjamin Cardin, longtime Ways and Means, now Finance Committee member, to the Washington Post. All of these people are lying to us. We are now to believe. Don't cost nothing, we'll all be rich. We'll be millionaires from selling windmills to each other, as the panel before us told us. This is Chip's slide, just showing the temperature after cap and trade will be whatever it would have been. This is if the U.S. adopted Kerry Lieberman, and I believe on my reading of your post, Chip, was this meant if with actual emission reductions, not using that thing that must be attached to any politically viable scheme, offsets, which means you'll get no such thing. You'll get offset schemes with 80 years of projected tree growth granted in one accounting year. True story. And the tree never dies. It's rationing. The word cap sort of tips you off to this. We use the word promiscuously now, but cap and trade. The cap is the thing to focus on. The state decides how much of something the private sector can have, issues a quota, allowances, the quota goes down over time, and the quotas are allowed, they're actually politically allocated. They say it's a market mechanism. Like fun it is. Read the bill. Why is it 1,400 pages long? They allocate them to politically favored entities who then sell them in the market to some poor sap who did not have the same lobbying budget. It's not a market mechanism simply because buying and selling are involved. Don't fall for that. It's a means to raise the price of energy without voting on a direct, transparent tax. That costs jobs, the jobs of the people who vote for it. See BTU in 1993, and Al Gore admitted this to the Financial Times in 2006. Cap and trade is a tax, and a great big one. John Dingell, the longest-serving member of Congress, he knows taxes of all varieties. Here's some insight on cap and trade from two EPA Region 9 lawyers. There are at least three things wrong with that, okay? That's San Francisco. Unlike a fee or a tax, a cap requires Soviet-style pre-planning, and this was not intended as a compliment. Easily subject to gaming and manipulation, creating artificial scarcity that is likely to result in disruptions and unfairness. A preview of such disruptions was provided by the market manipulations that created the California energy crisis early in this decade. California energy crisis, market manipulations. Any more come to mind? Thank you. Guess who invented this? Enron. I know, I was in the room. 1997, they got together with Sir John Brown, met in the Oval Office with the president and the vice president. 2 weeks after the Senate unanimously instructed them not to go to Kyoto and agree to that, and they said go to Kyoto and agree to that. You know who won that one? Apparently they're in the Constitution too, somewhere in the back with all the scary stuff. Kyoto's exactly what I've been lobbying for, will be good for Enron stock. If implemented, will do more to promote our business than almost anything else. Enron now has excellent credentials with many green interests, and they rattle off the names. This position should be increasingly cultivated and capitalized on. In parentheses, a misspelled, but you get the point, monetized. Baptist and bootlegger coalition, where the rent seekers pay green groups to scare you to fall for an agenda to award on economic investments. World's second oldest profession, not new, just a new twist on it. Green jobs. Okay, in closing, Van Jones was lying too, right? When he said we want to move from suicidal gray capitalism, he was the star recruit they'd been watching for years. He didn't slip through the vetting process as the Washington Post wrung their hands. He was appointed precisely for his views. So the green economy will start off as a small subset, and we're going to push it and push it and push it until it becomes the engine for transforming the whole society. It always does tend to come back to that. We are a wretchedly, fatally flawed actor who must be brought under control. The candid blue-green admission, it's an economic restructuring bill for the global economy. We should not pretend that it isn't. Okay, let's not. Let's have this debate. A taxpayer-funded group in the UK, the Tyndall Center, had a memo saying this is the planned recession. The planned recession could avoid the climate catastrophe that's always just over the horizon, either literally or figuratively. And we're going to have to stop building airports, switch to electric cars, and shut down coal-fired power stations. You'll notice a slight tension there between electric cars and shutting down coal-fired power stations as part of a planned recession to gently administer to the climate. In sum, tell your constituents, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, and those people who represent you, we know the issue isn't the issue. Those people are now screaming about this just proves we can't drill offshore. We're drilling dangerously in deep water because we're not allowed to drill onshore or nearby the shore, so now we go deeply offshore. They're not anti-offshore, they're anti-onshore. They're anti-energy. Energy provides the key to our freedoms. They've declared ideological war on all domestic energy sources that work. They've even, EPA, declared war on Appalachian coal in the name of a mayfly that lives about 24 hours. Bugs over people. They vowed higher electricity and gas prices. Remember, the president said he didn't have a problem with high gas prices, just with them going up too fast, because then you notice and start saying things like drill here, drill now. Cap and trade's not an environment bill. You're right, Senator Kerry. The temperature would be whatever it was going to be. It's really about what it will do. It's a long-held wish list of policy demands, lifestyle demands from the same list of usual suspects. It's about your liberty and their power. Burn this on your retina. We're selling and signing this tomorrow, but anyway, this details it all just out a few weeks ago. Thank you very much.